Welcome to Inside the CISO's Office, RSA edition. I'm John Bruggeman, Consulting CISO for CBTS, and I'm with Dave Lewis, Advisory CISO for Cisco, and we're here talking about all things cybersecurity. One of the things that is on a number of people's minds, and although it seems like some people feel that zero trust has been beaten like a dead horse and don't need to talk about it, I've given about 6 talks in 2022, and I gave one a month ago at a conference in Dayton. Zero trust has been a sellout every time I've given a talk about it. And when I ask people to raise their hand if they, how far along on their journey, the most recent example was in Dayton, and 2 out of 42 people raised their hand. So what is your take? What is Cisco's take on zero trust, and how can Cisco help people with that journey?
Well, zero trust quite literally is a strategy, and people have to frame it. Exactly, it's not a product. There's no end state. There's no certification. I'm zero trust certified. Check. That's not going to happen. And people have to really be cognizant of that. It's fundamentally about risk reduction.
Yeah.
So you're looking about things like network zone segmentation, multi-factor authentication.
A little slower.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Caffeinated. So you're looking at things like
network segmentation.
Network segmentation, multi-factor authentication. Basically
proving somebody's identity.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of those key pieces of the puzzle, because we tend to rely far too heavily on static usernames and passwords.
Yes.
And that's, I say this time and again, it is the equivalent of a house key. You lock your house at the beginning of the day, go off to work, your stuff is protected, unless somebody finds your key and knows who that belongs to. Yeah. The house doesn't know who it is coming through the front door.
It just knows that the key worked in the lock.
Whereas, something like multi-factor authentication, it can really look and say, oh, this is the person who is supposed to be here. Okay. In one company I worked at many moons ago, in the first week I was there, we had an assessment of all the super user accounts in the environment.
A good thing to do.
We found 10 that were super user status for people that were no longer there.
Oops.
1 had been used in the last 2 years, but that particular account belonged to somebody who had actually been dead for 5.
Oh my goodness.
So that was a little bit jarring.
Let me get that straight. So the account had been used within 2 years, but it was an account of someone who had passed away 5 years before.
Yes. Wow. That was absolutely
jarring. That's what we would call credential reuse. Yeah.
Ghost in the system. And it was really a jarring moment. Thankfully, it was not of a negative impact, but the thing is, you can't rely on hope, luck, and trust when you're doing security.
Hope is not a strategy.
Exactly, yes.
So that's good. So Cisco has a number of tools I know that can help with a zero trust journey for people. We both know, obviously, that it's not a SKU and not a product, but the way that I tend to talk about it when I talk about zero trust for people so that they can start to understand it is you want to start with identity. So Cisco has some products in the identity space.
Mm-hmm. Duo multi-factor authentication, that's one example there. We have ICE, we have all the various tools for doing network segmentation. Basically, we're a one-stop shop for security. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I have these conversations in different parts of the world. I'm very fortunate I get to travel the world and talk to customers everywhere. Not everybody sees Cisco as a security company, and
which surprises me.
Exactly, and myself included. And this is always a bit of a surprising moment when they realize just how much we have in a security portfolio. And it's really interesting to watch them go, oh, wow, I had no idea, and their eyes light up.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been in IT for over 30 years and over 25 years as a practitioner at the IT director or CIO type level. And I've been a CISO for 20 years plus, and I've known Cisco as a router shop and firewalls. I mean, Cisco ASA firewalls. I mean,
PICs.
And Cisco PICs, yes. Yeah, I could have dated myself with that reference,
but I just did, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's that surprises me. I mean, I know a number of other companies that people don't think about when they think about security, but I would have assumed, obviously incorrectly.
And that's one of the strange things about it, because we are quite literally one of, if not the biggest security company on the planet. And trying to get people to understand that, moving away from that network-centric and understanding that we have so much more to offer and to help better protect customers.
So you're going to be sitting in a potentially positive space if customers decide, and we didn't really talk about this beforehand, but vendor consolidation is a topic too for, I believe, this year and the next couple of years. So Cisco as a security company to me seems like a no-brainer, and vendor consolidation is a topic that I expect will get some traction in 2023 and beyond, because you have a number, I certainly have a number of customers who have five, they've gone best of breed. So they've got the best of breed for their security stack, but now they have 5 or 6 or 7 vendors that they have to manage. So Cisco has positioned themselves, it sounds like, to be a vendor that you can consolidate around.
Yeah, and Cisco very much wants to be a trusted partner to work with customers. We don't want to say, here's the box with the blinky lights and leave. We want to make sure that we're building that relationship, because we are moving more and more into cloud-based offerings. And we want to make sure that we are building up that trust with our customer base so that they know that when they are in a pinch or they need help with something, that we're there to help them.
Good. Well, that'll be very helpful. Some people might not like to consolidate on one vendor, but as you have so many different pieces of the puzzle that you have to put together, vendor consolidation makes sense for a number of instances and use cases.
And from our perspective, we're here to help. If a customer wants to come all in, we're fine with that. But if they want to do it in disparate pieces, we're fine with that too.
Yeah.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're there to help the customer achieve their outcomes to satisfy the aspirations of their business. We don't want to dictate to them saying this is it or nothing, because that's not going to win any favor.
Right. And there's some customers that will turn them off fairly quickly.
Yep.
So another topic that is I'm hearing a lot about is attack surface management, which is becoming a little bit of a buzzword, but I see it as a way for companies to understand what their external attack surface looks like to threat actors. So what's Cisco's play in that market?
Oh, well, we have, the Talos, we have XDR, we have all of these different components that we can help with that. Because a lot of times with customers, they don't understand what their exposures may be.
Yes.
And I know because at one point I was one of those customers.
Okay.
And we started doing scans of our external infrastructure. And we were told that we weren't supposed to do it because we were only supposed to do it in a certain time window. And we found out people turned stuff off during that time window. So
that's not good.
So I violated that, and I did it off hours when nobody was looking and nobody caught me. But I also found a lot of stuff that was exposing us to potential undue harm.
Now that surprises me. I'm aware, I have a couple of customers that I'm helping with security assessments where, the fundamental controls in a security assessment from either the NIST cybersecurity framework or ISO 27000 or CIS controls, you have to know what assets are on your network.
Yes.
If you don't have that fundamental control, you're going to have a hard time securing your environment because you won't know what's good and what's bad. So I see that as a way that attack surface management can help companies, particularly if they've grown through acquisition. Because if you, say, are getting to become a bigger company and you buy a smaller company, unless they have a good inventory, you won't know what's there.
Yes.
So attack surface management can help in that regard. So is there a particular, I know a couple different firewall vendors that say that they scan the entire internet address space looking for assets, and then they can resell that information. Is that something that Cisco does?
We don't do the scanning per se, but we do have a threat intelligence service called Talos.
Yes.
And they do absolutely fantastic work. And it's one of those things where whenever I'm having talks with customers when they're having difficulty understanding what they have to be worried about, and I don't mean that in a fear, uncertainty, and doubt, it's just like how they can best protect themselves. Once they start talking with our folks at Talos, they're like, whoa, okay, now I get this, because they're able to get actionable intelligence.
So does Talos, let's say I walk up to Cisco, I talk to my rep, and I say, hey, I'm interested in understanding what my exposures are. We get a Talos engagement, a couple of hours, let's say it's a bucket of 60 or 100 hours. So I can give them an email address, a URL. How do they find out what my attack surface looks like?
I'll be honest, I don't know the secret sauce of how they do that part. And I don't know the nature of how they're doing their engagements. So I would be a little bit speaking out of school if I were to say that myself.
Okay. But it is an offering that they have.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the vendors I talked to here said, all we need is an email address. We take it from there. I'm like, well, and I understand that. We have 10 penetration testers on the CBTS security team that I'm a member of, and that's how our guys get started too. Is they email the customers. Yeah, a lot of black box type of engagements. So
and there's some great tools out there that are not us, that are Paterva's Multigo tool and things like that, where you can. It's staggering how much information that thing can collect.
Yeah, and the whole open source intelligence gathering. I got a book, I forget the author's name right now, but it was fantastic. I mean, you can run some really nice or bad, depending on your point of view, searches of the internet for open source intelligence to begin to leverage that if you're an attacker, if you have bad intent. Chat GPT, or as I like to call it, machine learning or large language models. It is not artificial intelligence. I refuse to call it artificial intelligence.
I knew I liked you.
It's not artificial. It's completely programmed, and it's not intelligent. So what is your take on it?
I think it is a useful tool that has yet to find its place.
It has potential.
It absolutely has potential. And if it is used in a way that makes sense, where it's integrated into products where it makes sense, that's a key piece of the puzzle. But people have to understand that if they're loading information into it at this stage, that information is then accessible by other parties.
Yeah, that's going to be a blog post. I haven't written it yet. I have it in my head, of course, but I'm just stunned that people were putting confidential company information into Chat GPT to get it to do something. And I'm like, what are you thinking?
Regrettably, that has happened in a very public, I won't name who it happened to, because I feel bad for them. I mean, nobody wants to go through a data breach, but they were using it ostensibly in a smart way. They were trying to do meeting notes.
Oh, I was thinking of the one where they were doing testing of their environment. So
no, I didn't know about that one.
Okay, so go on with your story.
So they were putting meeting notes into Chat GPT, trying to distill them down in a way that was easier to share with people.
And probably make it a little bit more readable.
Exactly. And so I understand the business case, but the damage there was that information was accessible by other parties. So fundamentally, it was a data breach, albeit unintended. Though the whoops factor usually comes calling every once in a while.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, Chat GPT, I can see the potential, absolutely. I can see it if it's done right, and you have contracts in place and protections in place so the data does not get shared by other parties. And I think that, yes, ultimately, it's just another hammer. How you use it, that particular tool, is the key piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And I worry about everybody rushing headlong into trying it now. Because one of the things I did is I went through and I tried all of these different ways for it to write blog posts. So I got it to write about 40 different blog posts, and I noticed there was a key pattern. And each one of them had the exact same taxonomy in it.
Yeah.
So I scanned the internet looking for that particular taxonomy, and I found several companies in this space that were using it to generate their blog posts.
Oh my goodness.
I won't name names. I would hope that if they hear this, they will just stop doing that.
Yeah.
Because they have to rely on the strength of the people.
Yeah, and here I used it to write a fake disclaimer. We were in a meeting. I won't say that the meeting was boring, but we all had a few extra cycles during this particular meeting, and I went into Chat GPT and I had it write a disclaimer for a mandatory pizza party where you had to dress as your favorite Star Wars character. It did a great job. I mean, if I had to write disclaimers, or if I had to write, some potentially routine policy documents, I can see that. I mean, because, policy documents typically don't have to be that unique.
Yeah.
And it did a good job of it. And then, so I did that say 4 weeks ago. And then I came back after Chat GPT started to have some unusual responses to some people's questions. And so then I put in the same request to see if it generated something different. And it did. And this time it put in a disclaimer that said inappropriate dress will be disallowed or something to that effect. And I thought, well, that's an interesting addition to my otherwise benign mandatory disclaimer. And so then I rewrote the request and I said, inappropriate dress is allowed. And then it wrote back and it said, I'm sorry, that violates my policies. I won't write this disclaimer. I thought, wow, okay. So they put a few guardrails in there. I still think that anybody who's doing artificial intelligence should at least read Isaac Asimov's first 3 robotics books. I mean, you have the law of robotics. It's really not that complicated.
And there's a lot of really good books on AI now at this point. There's one book that, unfortunately, the name is escaping me at this moment, but it's about the mass criminalization using technology. So all of this data being collected about people and neighborhoods and demographics, and then using it to monitor folks as well. It
can get creepy and scary.
Yeah, like smart cities, I understand the value add proposition, but also there is a dark side of it that people don't always take into account.
Well, and you have some countries, and we're going way off topic, but I'll leave it up to Lance to figure this out. So, Lance, feel free to edit as necessary. So, when you think about city-states like Singapore, where they have tremendous amounts of cameras and monitoring for good intent, but I could see how that could be turned the other way. And then you have countries, nation-states like China, where they're doing mass surveillance on a scale that would make the NSA envious, if not something else. You know?
Like, for example, the Singapore example, and as part of my master's degree that I'm working on, there was a case study where they monitored all the traffic in the city over an extended period of time to look for the flows, peak times, and all the rest of it. And it was absolutely amazing what they were able to discover based on the flow of traffic, when the best time was to travel. And it was really quite fascinating to see all of that particular data, because then they were able to better address.
I say, hopefully they used that information for good.
Yeah, oh,
said, let's change the lighting sequence so that traffic flows a little better.
Well, that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
And so that was absolutely a marvelous one to see. So there are definitely positive aspects, but yeah, I do get concerned about the potential negative impacts as well, because there is big business on that side as well.
We could go down the path of data brokers and how much they're evil people in general, and at least in the United States. I know it's a business, but there's some unscrupulous data brokers out there. We'll save that for another time.
I think so.
This has been great. Dave, I appreciate your time,
Thank you very much.
and we'll be in touch.